What happens when things go wrong on an architectural pilgrimage? Coming up on Architecture Codex.
Architecture Codex. If you want to see more, like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe.
I may not be the best traveling companion. I tend to wake up early, go to churches, museums, and other buildings of interest. I eat street food that's cheap, and I will sit in uncomfortable areas so I can do sketches. I avoid souvenir shops and all other stores. I also avoid canned tours, but I am willing to share extensive explanations of the buildings and the urban planning that we might see with those walking with me. My kids call these pappy tours. And I'm not big on nightlife. I like theater and entertainment, but I don't go drinking. I've never been drunk. I drink wine with dinner, that's about it. I've never been high, and I've never paid for companionship. Some people might say I'm boring, but at least I'm boring enough that I am still a viable blood donor. Sometimes I seek out-of-the-way places that tourists don't go to, or restaurants where tourists don't eat. And usually that's okay, but sometimes things go wrong. Maybe not as wrong as the time I was in Egypt and had my passport and all my money stolen, but that's another story. And so when I mentioned my interest in visiting Tijuana, Mexico, and the cultural center there, many friends asked, very concerned, why I would want to go there. Well, I wanted to go there because I had not been there. I have had short visits to Mexico elsewhere, but for many Americans, Tijuana, being adjacent to San Diego, it is often their first Mexican experience. With a bit of research, I thought I had found the best place to walk across the border and see the happy face of Tijuana. And from there, we could casually walk to my destination, my pilgrimage, the Tijuana Cultural Center. It turns out my research was not helpful. The moment we crossed the border, I lost all phone, internet, and GPS service. So if walking across the border wasn't exactly an entry into a fiesta at Tijuana, it was an education. And of course, that's why I go in the first place. The border between Mexico and the USA at Tijuana is a commercial interface. And while pedestrian tourists are accommodated, they are minuscule when it comes to all the other daily business and commuting going on. But maybe my impression of walking into Tijuana was too reliant on Orson Welles' movie A Touch of Evil. It turns out that was just a movie. There were more highway ramps and fewer pedestrian crossings between the border and our destination, so we opted for a taxi who got us to the cultural center very quickly. And even though we tried to walk back, we opted to do the taxi again. But since I had no phone service, this meant going back to the cultural center and explaining to the staff how our phone did not work and we needed to call the taxi. Everyone was very helpful and kind, so it did not turn out to be the sort of scary adventure that I've had elsewhere. The Tijuana Cultural Center is in the Zona Rio district. It was designed by Pedro Ramírez Vázquez and Manuel Rossen Morrison and opened in 1982. The visual centerpiece is The Ball, La Bolla, an IMAX theater inside a stegosphere which premiered long before the so-called Sphere in Vegas, Architectural Codex video number 82. It stands alone in front of a bigger building behind, now referred to as the Cube, El Cubo, with museums, education, and performing areas indoors and out. And while we were there, the place was very active, and we enjoyed some music in the back garden. The design juxtaposes the sphere set prominently alone at the most visible corner of the site with the more traditional rectilinear museum and cultural center behind it. The space is serene and bold, using basic geometries in the way that 20th century architects like bold, big ideas. The sphere gives the center a unique identity and entry into the larger complex behind. It is then the space around the sphere which interrupts the normal building massing on the immense and central boulevard deep into Tijuana that makes this destination architecture, at least for people interested in architecture and not the best place in Tijuana to buy tequila. and as a cultural center, it appears to serve the people of Tijuana and not the tourists. But I got the impression the building was saying, this is who we are. We are the Tijuanans in Mexico, and inviting tourists to come and see what it was really like. I enjoyed my visit to the cultural center, and I liked the architecture. Pedro Ramírez Vázquez was an award-winning architect, public servant, and advocate of human rights. The Los Angeles Times wrote, quote, Ramírez Vázquez was known for stunningly original designs that blended a European modernist sensibility with pre-Columbian aesthetics, end quote. Among his achievements, developing a prefab construction method that allowed rural areas in Mexico to get schools built efficiently and economically. But his commissions included churches, museums and cultural centers, theaters and performing arts centers, pavilions at international expositions, Olympic buildings, and government buildings spread around the world. His impact in Mexico was immense as both an architect and as an ambassador of Mexican culture. His partner for the design of the Tijuana Cultural Center, Manuel Rossen Morrison, had his own distinguished international architectural career paralleling Vázquez's, but I am unable to find out more information about how their collaboration worked at the Tijuana Cultural Center and how it might have affected the design. So my friends who warned me against going to Tijuana may have meant well, but they may not fully have appreciated my experience traveling around the world and how boring a tourist I actually am. And so in spite of some minor difficulties, this was a very successful pilgrimage. This is a big world, diverse in culture and architecture, and I feel like I have only scratched the surface. But when I travel, I'm not really seeking comfortable sameness. I am seeking the differences. That is why when we went to Cancun, my wife and I enjoyed the beautiful waters, but we did not feel like we were in Mexico. Maybe it was the Burger King, the Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, the Olive Garden, and the other chain restaurants and stores I could access in the United States. So my wife and I took the public bus, the ones the hotel workers take, to the last stop and walked until there were no streetlights and we found a place to eat. We might have been out of place, but we finally felt like we were in Mexico. So while I did not see the tourist center of Tijuana, I did see an intriguing building, learned about two architects of whom I did not know, took in some local culture, and met some nice, helpful, friendly people. This then is the reward of adventurous travel, seeing those things that you might not normally see, particularly if you go to those places people don't normally go. And after years of taking such chances, I have not ended up in prison, at least so far. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture CodeX.